Yo, what's up? This is Jay Dennis, and we are back with another Ranked and Reviewed. And today we are doing a band that I have not been as excited about as since I knew how to grammar. I haven't been as excited to do a Ranked and Reviewed since Megadeth, and today's band is Green Day. Probably haven't heard me talk a whole lot about this band. But they are absolutely one of my favorite childhood bands, and having gone back and revisited their 13 albums, studio albums, they sound as incredible as ever, and I went back and revisited some albums that I probably slept on, but they are absolutely one of the bands that got me into playing guitar at the age of 13, 2004, during the American Idiot era. And been listening to them in pretty much all of their albums ever since. So today I'm going to be doing 13 studio albums dating back to 1990 up until their most recent release in the year of 2020. And I own 5 of their studio albums and one International Super Hits, a compilation album. One of the bands that, along with them and Blink-182 and maybe a few others, it was really the greatest hits album that got me into them. And also wanted to make a video to kind of show my collection. I got the International Super Hits guitar tab book. I've had this since 2004, so this is kind of an old copy right here. But also, when did this come out? Guitar Legends magazine with Billy Joe Armstrong on there. From it doesn't really say the year, but it had to have been like 2005 or 2004, because they were showing tabs, and of course they had the mid 2000s alternative boom. We had My Chemical Romance, Taking Back Sunday tabs in here as well, but just kind of going through the history and seeing some old pictures of Green Day and seeing how far they've come and how they're still incredible to this day really makes me appreciate where I came from, because at the time in 8th grade it was Green Day and Sum 41 for the most part that made me want to pick up the guitar and start playing. But anyway, over the years, mostly the mid 2000s and then part of the early 2010s and then the last couple weeks, I've been pretty engaged with Green Day and their discography, but during the mid-2000s I was really into the making of music videos and like watching documentaries about like American Idiot and what have you. And to prepare for this Ranked and Reviewed, I also did watch the Quattro documentary, which recounted Uno Dos Tre trilogy, and I think my ranking will look somewhat similar to a lot of what you see, maybe some differences here and there, but I actually ended up having a couple of changes, so I'm really glad I listened to every album quite a bit before I did this, but I feel pretty confident about this. And of course I have top 10 tracks as well. Ultimately I think the spread between the best and the worst was like a 7.2 out of 10 up to like a 9.1 out of 10, and maybe there's like 1 or 2 ties in there. But without further ado, a band I love very much, got me into playing guitar, got me through some tough times, and is still very much a timeless band. There are 13 studio albums, ranking from least favorite to most favorite. Yet another band who has no bad albums, but obviously some are much better than others, so let's go ahead and get started. At the number 13 spot, we do of course have their most recent album, Father of All Motherfuckers, from 2020. So my immediate guess, and just speculation based on what I've seen, is this isn't a real album. It's a phoned-in effort to satisfy a record contract. But it's still 26 minutes of good music. Green Day's kind of incapable of making bad music. It's just this album lacks hooks. And aside from Junkies on a High, every song on here was below an 8, which means most songs were kind of good. A couple mediocre tracks like Stab You in the Heart and the opening track, Father of All. I don't mind the high-pitched vocals. I don't know why the word escapes me when you sing in your head voice. The high-pitched vocals. Probably screaming it at the camera right now. But, Oh Yeah is not a great single. And it's just not a very memorable album. I would never go back and listen to this again. Graphicia is also a decent song. But yeah, aside from Junkies on a High, really nothing worth listening to on here. Definitely their worst album. I kind of knew this would be their worst album, but I just really wanted to go back and listen to it again just in case. When it came out, didn't really impress me, and when I came back and re-listened to it, still didn't. I mean, the artwork sucks. It's clearly a phoned-in effort, and not really what Green Day is best known for. They obviously have so much better material. So much better that at the number 12 spot, this album is much better already. From the trilogy, we have the album Trey. I think out of the trilogy, this is their weakest album. It's the most inconsistent. The opening and closing tracks don't really do a whole lot for me, but there are still a couple of cool songs on here, like X-Kid. It's got my favorite chord progression. It's got a cool guitar solo. Dirty Rotten Bastards has very much a Homecoming sound to it. Dirty Rotten Bastards, I think most Green Day fans would admit, is probably the best track on the album, and for me, along with X-Kid. And then 99 Revolutions is also a pretty solid track as well. But other than that, aside from Amanda, there's really no other tracks on here that do anything for me. Drama Queen, Missing You, a little Boy Named Trained. Just really not great songs at all. Kind of a weak album. I can definitely respect the work that went into the album and into the trilogy, but it doesn't mean that the final product wasn't as consistent or as legendary as what would be before, maybe even after. But I do appreciate what they were doing there during that era. The Quattro documentary gave me some perspective on that. At the number 11 spot, we have the previous album, Dose, the one with Mike Dirnt on the cover. A little bit more raw, a little bit more garage rock sound than Trey, so a little bit more edge to it. Make Out Party, Stray Heart, Ashley, Lazy Bones, all great tracks. Nothing excellent on this album, but just slightly better than Trey, a little bit more consistency. And then Amy, the closing track, is a beautiful song. I enjoy the guitar riff and of course the message. I actually don't hate the song Nightlife. I think it's pretty catchy. I love the bass line. But overall, it's just not an album that I would love listening to from start to finish. I think what the trilogy lacks or suffers from, especially on Dose and Trey, is just the lack of memorable songs. I mean, the music is fantastic. Billy Joe still sounds great. The guitar solos are awesome. But it's just, it doesn't have the hooks and it doesn't have the... It's got the passion, but it just doesn't have the same level of oomph or power that other material has. So, number 11 spot easily goes to Dose, which is roughly tied with Trey, but just slightly better. Number 10 spot, and I'm glad I listened to this album again, because it ended up being much better. I originally thought this was their worst album. Is their second album, Kerplunk, which I have. I've owned this album for a long time, but I've never actually listened to it from start to finish all the way through. This album takes quite a few listens to grow on you, but it has a lot of charm. It is the perfect midway album between 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours and Dookie. This is a perfect midway album. And there's just songs on here that you never hear sounds like that again, except for on this album. Christie Road, One for the Razorbacks, 80. Best song on the album is 80. And Words I Might Have Ate. It's kind of an interesting closing track if you're looking at just the standard edition of the album. I think it's charming. I think it's catchy and it's cool. And the reason I gave this one the edge over the previous albums is because for a second album effort, this was pretty solid and pretty interesting for a punk band to do. So while I initially thought at first listen this album was very poorly executed, it actually flows really well and is a very charming Green Day album. It sits comfortably at the number 10 spot from 1991, I think. Or 92. Yeah, 92. Like I said, the best songs on that album are 80, and of course the original version of Welcome to Paradise. The only song I didn't much care for was Dominated Love Slave, which isn't really a serious song, it's just a goofy Trey song. Number 9 spot goes to Uno. Now, I think Uno is easily the best out of the trilogy, and while the trilogy was fresh in the year 2012, I actually did listen to all the albums as they came out, and I enjoyed quite a few tracks, but Uno was the easiest. Uno was the easiest to get through from start to finish. It's just kind of the most pop punky, fun album to listen to. It's got the best singles. Nuclear Family's the best opening track. Oh Love is definitely the worst closing track, in my opinion. I don't much care for that song. But Stay the Night, Let Yourself Go, Kill the DJ. All great singles. I know some people don't like Kill the DJ, but I think it's catchy and funky. I actually enjoy the song. Carpe Diem's also a solid track. But just the back half of the album, from Troublemaker all the way to Oh Love, it's just... Excuse me, I had to let my dogs in. But yeah, back half of the album is just kind of really nothing memorable back there. So even though it's marginally better than Kerplunk, I would probably easily listen to Kerplunk before I listen to Uno, but just because Uno has a couple of higher rated tracks, whereas Kerplunk really doesn't have anything that goes north of an 8 out of 10, Uno takes the slight advantage over that. I think it's the best album in the trilogy, and again, I think it's kind of the easiest to listen to, but just the lack of consistency on the back half is what drags it down to the bottom half of the ranking. Next up at the number 8 spot, we have their first release, 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours, which is, I believe, 4 separate EPs, 3 separate EPs. The 39 Smooth, 1000 Hours EP, Slappy EP, yeah, basically 3 EPs from 1988 to 1990, all thrown together onto here. The amount of content, 18 tracks, 19 with the bonus track, is just insane. The raw sound on this album, I just think this album's better than Kerplunk because the guitar work is better, the hooks are better, the songs are more memorable, and again, the guitar solos are fantastic. You know, there's just no other sound like this, and I think Green Day's raw material was actually pretty dang well executed. You had songs like Green Day, you had songs like Paper Lanterns, Why Do You Want Him, 409 in Your Coffee Maker. These are cool title tracks too. The opening track, At the Library, I mean, such a solid, catchy opening track that I really enjoy. The opening riff to Disappearing Boy, the raw guitar riffs, Green Day mostly plays power chords, but 1039 definitely has some interesting string, not skipping, but just more individual notes played within the power chords. And I just, again, really thought that 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours was a solid experience. I did own the album back in the day when I was becoming a new Green Day fan, and I enjoyed it back then, and I certainly still enjoy it now, but with a more mature ear, more open-minded music, it sounds even better today than I enjoyed it more back then. Next up, we kind of have a two-way tie, and I'm going to actually swap the ranking because I listened to both these albums again, and I now think one is better than the other now. At the number 7 spot, we have from the year 2000, Warning. Definitely a more experimental, melodic album, but it definitely does still have some high energy, punk energy, with songs like Minority, Blood, Sex, Booze. The album's kind of front and back loaded though. Some of the middle tracks kind of dip a little bit, and there's really not any particularly... Stop. There's not really any particularly high octane tracks that really elevate this album higher. And while this album does kind of have a theme going through it, it's just not as consistent as the album that I put above it that's technically tied with. But, you know, Warning, while it's a great single, it's catchy, it's just not a super high energy song. Minority, that is a more high energy song with great guitar work. And Waiting, kind of the same complaint. It's catchy, but it's just not very high energy. I actually think one of the better songs on the album is Macy's Day Parade. I used to not like it very much, but I actually really enjoy it now as an adult. Other tracks worth listening to are Church on Sunday, Blood, Sex, and Booze, Deadbeat Holiday, Castaway, but some songs, in my opinion, worth not listening to every time, kind of skippable tracks, are Misery, Hold On, and Jackass. But overall, Warning is definitely an underrated album. Definitely worth going back and listening to, and after putting out the powerhouse albums that they did in the 90s, it's okay for them to have like a little setback but still have something worth listening to like Warning. But then the next spot goes to the slightly better and more consistently themed Insomniac from 1995. You know, how do you follow up the success of a breakout album like Dookie? You make it a little bit darker, a little bit angrier, and you do Insomniac. This was an album I didn't, along with Warning, that back then I didn't really listen to these albums from start to finish. I was mostly about the singles. But Insomniac, while it has some tracks that are kind of repetitive and sound like each other, the overall theme is pretty solid. It's a very easy album to listen to. And it closes with a pretty solid single, Walking Contradiction. I love that music video and that song. A lot of shorter tracks on here. The singles aren't extremely high octane, but they're definitely better than the ones lower on the list. You know, you got that freaking nasty riff in Geek Stink Breath, very underrated track. You got Stuck With Me, which is pretty catchy, great bass line in there. I've gone this far into the video, how have I not talked about what an insanely good bass player that Mike Dirnt is? Every musician in that band, you take away one piece of the band, they are no longer Green Day. You know, Billy Joe might be the mastermind for the most part, but Mike Dirnt's bass playing and bass tone, and Trey Cool's high energy drumming and his ability to play different styles and add different charm to it, it's what makes Green Day Green Day. And Mike Dirnt's bass playing is very prominent on this album in songs like Panic Song, Stuck With Me, trying to think of whatever else, but mostly the singles on here are what I enjoy the most. You know, there's also Brain Stew, which is a fun song, nice intro song to try to learn. But yeah, it's just a more consistent album. It's got a dark tone to it. It's definitely not their best album, but it's for where they were at in their career, it was an excellent follow-up to a breakout album like Dookie. I think now we get to the top 5 now. This is kind of where we get to the bulk of my collection here. Actually, no, the top 3 is. At the number 5 spot, an album that I did not listen to at all, really, when it came out, and I slept on it all this time, is their 2009 release, 21st Century Breakdown. I kept wondering, is this album going to be more towards the bottom? No. It is an excellent follow-up to American Idiot, another kind of like theatrical rock opera style album with a lot of songs that I overlooked. I mean, you got Viva La Gloria, you got Christian's Inferno. I fucking love Christian's Inferno, just that chorus. Last of the American Girls with that post-chorus guitar work. So much energy in that. Restless Heart Syndrome, again, more great guitar work. The lead guitar work on this album is disgusting. Like, I love 21st Century Breakdown because of that. And some people might disagree with me here, but I actually think 21 Guns is one of their best songs. And part of it's because it has one of my favorite guitar solos of all time on it. It might be really simple, it might be really, I don't know. The simplicity of what they write sometimes has so much feel and emotion behind it that I can't listen to 21 Guns and not like feel something. So 21 Guns, probably by itself, elevated this album to the top 5 for me. But, you know, overall, opening track, it's not their most consistent album, but all the songs I just rattled off, including Murder City, maybe Peacemaker, their closing track, See the Light. You know, there's a lot of content on this album. It's about a 70-minute album, and I'd say about maybe 50 minutes of it is pretty damn solid. If it was a little bit more consistent, it could have been top 3. But you had some weaker tracks on here, like Know Your Enemy. While I like the guitar work, I just don't think it's a great hook. And yeah, just a handful of songs that don't really do it for me, like Little Girl, East Jesus Nowhere, Before the Lobotomy. What else? Static Age. American Eulogy, didn't really care for that song. But while it's an inconsistent album, the high points really do elevate it up. There's a lot of great guitar work on this album, and that's what makes it easily a top 5 album. Slept on this album for way too long, and really missed out on some good shit back then, but here we are enjoying it now. The number 4 spot, we have the 2016 release, Revolution Radio. 2016, while it was a lousy year for certain things, it was a great year for music. It was also the year that I graduated college, when Revolution Radio was one of the soundtracks to that. Just some high octane, high energy. I get paid, by the way, by the amount of times I say the word octane, so octane. The singles on this album are brilliant. You got such catchy lead guitar work and riffage, and songs like Bang Bang, Revolution Radio. For a while, I thought Revolution Radio was like American Idiot Part 2. There were so many like similar themes and tones and sounds. Didn't occur to me that 21st Century Breakdown was kind of a, not a sequel maybe, but a Part 2, another rock opera. So maybe whatever you think, 21st Century Breakdown or Revolution Radio and American Idiot, those all have like a common theme in my opinion. I did quite a bit of research on Green Day that I might have missed, but I'm not 100% informed on if they meant to do any type of continuation of that, not storyline, but just that theme and that sound. Revolution Radio is a very consistent, very excellent album. The only thing that it suffers from is it opens and closes on a weak note. Somewhere Now and Ordinary World are kind of the weakest tracks on the album, but everything else, from Bang Bang up until Forever Now, all great tracks or excellent tracks. Troubled Times, the guitar work, Forever Now, Too Dumb to Die. I love that hook. I love the guitar, the post-chorus, like it's so fun to listen to. Outlaws, just the back and forth between the melodic and the kind of the heavier aggressive stuff. I think Revolution Radio did it really well and was a great comeback album after not a lackluster, but just a somewhat disorganized, not mess. I don't want to diss the trilogy, because the trilogy had a lot of merit to it. And there was passion in it. I just think Revolution Radio was a more focused, concentrated effort that yielded a better album. Still Breathing, Youngblood. Like, I have no issues with any songs on this album except for the first and last tracks. They're just not the best material, and if they were a little better, this album could have maybe placed a little higher. But in terms of modern day Green Day, Revolution Radio is easily their best album, with Bang Bang, that super fast punk rock energy, the solo, and then Revolution Radio, just that main guitar line. But now we are on to the top 3 of Green Day's best albums, and I kind of thought these top 3 were going to be the top 3. I mean, come on. So, at the number 3 spot, we have their their 1997 release, Nimrod. There is no other album like this, and there will probably never be another one again. Late 90s brilliance, where there's just this much content on an album. You got 18 tracks, no theme, no anything, just a bunch of hard-hitting material, a bunch of hooks. Even though Billy Joe went to the studio with little to no lyrics, you got some of the catchiest, most memorable songs on this album, and the guitar work is just excellent for the time. A great follow-up to Insomniac. Of course it has the iconic Good Riddance. I don't care how overplayed it is. It is an excellent song. It is like every guitar player's first song they learn. At least it was one of mine. But some of the best singles are on here. You got Hitchin' a Ride. You got Redundant. I love that song. Nice Guys Finish Last is not their best singles, but it is a solid opening track. Prosthetic Head's a fun closing track, though. Kind of a weird way to end after a time of your life, but you just got, a couple of interesting songs on here that you would only hear on an album like this. You have Last Ride In, which is a neighborhood drive-by song that's an instrumental. Really fun to listen to. It's got a great music video. But then you just have some solid non-single Green Day material. You've got Scattered, you've got Uptight. I love that song, Uptight. This is probably their easiest album to listen to from start to finish, in my opinion. It just doesn't have as many high marks as high songs. Really no 9s, honestly, but it's just a bunch of 8s and just a bunch of solid content from start to finish. Except for Good Riddance, that one got a 9.2. My favorite tracks, aside from the singles, are definitely Uptight, Scattered. I thought I liked King for a Day. I liked it more back then. Last Ride In. So yeah, this is just a very solid, non-thematic album. It's just very easy to listen to from start to finish. Very reminiscent of the times of the late 90s. And just a lot of happy energy on here with some little somber notes here and there to kind of bounce it out and bring you back in. But as a guitar player that likes to play fast or play punk, this album will definitely speak your language, whilst also peppering in some solid melodic material like Redundant or Time of Your Life. Nimrod is a excellent, possibly underrated album from Green Day. So we're at the top two. Two albums that pretty much everybody puts at the top, but how am I going to order these bad boys? All we got left are Dookie and American Idiot. And before I get to those, if I haven't shown it off already, there's my International Super Hits. Pretty much the album that got me into them. Again, with the tab book. Really don't remember how to play any Green Day, though, to be honest. A long time ago, but could probably easily learn this stuff again. So, at the spot, an album that has always been great, but as an adult, I definitely appreciate it a lot more now that I've grown beyond the singles. The number 2 spot goes to the breakout album, Dookie. This is a classic 90s edition. It's got the brown side right here. Got this at a used record store. What can I say that hasn't already been said? You got some of Green Day's most iconic 90s material on here. You got When I Come Around, Basket Case, Welcome to Paradise, She. But after listening to it a few more times, this album is also a grower. A lot of the non-singles, like the first 3 songs, Burnout, Having a Blast, and Chump, there is a confidence in the song Chump, where after putting out 1039 and Kerplunk, you knew that Green Day really found their way with this album. Just the swagger on this album is brilliant. The artwork is legendary. Other non-singles that I deeply enjoy are Pulling Teeth, which, when I was 14 I didn't really get it. I probably would have hated that song back then, but now I really enjoy it. Sassafras Roots. And then, the last couple tracks are pretty solid too. I don't really listen to FOD. Actually, FOD's got a great kicking, da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na. Like the freaking tone, the guitar, the distortion on that song is just awesome. So, this is, like Nimrod, an excellent 90s album, a coming-of-age album. If I was maybe 10 years older, or part of Generation X, I'm 30 years old, I'm a middle-aged millennial, I probably would have made this my number 1 album. But since I didn't technically grow up with this album, even though when I was a kid in the 90s, I saw my stepdad had this album in his CD collection. I saw this brown CD sitting in his CD case. But when I was a kid, I was all about the singles. And again, When I Come Around is one of the most 90s songs of all time. I really enjoyed that one. And I got nothing negative to say about Dookie. It just doesn't have the same emotional, nostalgic, sentimental power as their number one album, American Idiot. I'm the first person ever to put this album at the very top, aren't I? Now, American Idiot was a life-changing album for me. I haven't really talked about it much, but maybe top 20 albums of all time, easily. I'm not really going to talk too much about the storytelling or the characters because I frankly don't read into a lot of the lore, but I know that, at least on paper, it is a brilliantly executed album. The guitar riffs, the actual opening track, American Idiot, that riff, it's kind of the riff that made me want to pick up the guitar. It wasn't just Sum 41's Fat Lip, it was Green Day's American Idiot, it was Letter Bomb, it was Holiday, it was Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Like, every song on this album means something to an angsty 8th grader who's finally getting into music that he really enjoys and is really finding out how pivotal music is to his life. If I wanted to be fair and limit it to like 3 songs per album for a top 10 album, I'd have to cut songs off of here because I'd say most of their top 10 tracks are on this album. But this album is just, while most of the other albums are just really great or great, this album is excellent. It scores north of a 9 out of 10, which is not common at all. Best tracks on this album are the title track, which I see a lot of people rank low for some reason. American Idiot is a fucking classic. Great music video, too. Boulevard of Broken Dreams, come on. Near perfection of the song. But if Green Day has at least one perfect song, and this is where me and a lot of fans are in agreement, thank God, it's Letter Bomb. Letter Bomb is just a beautiful, powerful, heavy build-up of a song that just has you hooked from start to finish. The delivery of the solo, the payoff of everything, the closing. Letter Bomb is a flawless track, and I don't give a lot of songs a 10 out of 10. I'm kind of generous with my rankings, but I'm picky about what I deem excellent or even flawless. Letter Bomb is a perfect song. I wouldn't change anything about it. Me and my buddy back then, one of my best friends back then, we used to cover the songs on this album and play them. He'd play rhythm and I would play the little guitar solos in like American Idiot or da-na-na-na-na-na, like in Letter Bomb. So for like a beginning guitar player, Green Day was super accessible and super awesome. And just watching them on Fuse play their singles live, it was incredible. Watching the making of all their music videos for Holiday, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Jesus of Suburbia, man, that fucking music video is incredible. The long-ass songs, Jesus of Suburbia and Homecoming, are both just incredible songs. I pretty much love every song on this album. The only one that I'm not a massive fan of, and what's his face? John from ARTV would disagree with me. I think Are We the Waiting is kind of a weak track. I get the purpose of it, it's placed well on the album, but just as a song by itself, don't much care for it. But yeah, other than that, every song is either great or excellent. But the song, I talk very fondly about Letter Bomb, but the song that pretty much always without fail brings me to tears is What's Her Name, the closing track. I think it's one of the very few, if not the only Green Day song where he drops it down to drop D and just plays in the key of, is it D minor? I don't know, but just that chord progression, that D chord, it hits hard, that build up, going back and forth between the clean guitar and then the da-na-na-na-na. It's just an incredible song. It's an incredible album. The storytelling in between, the energy, the freaking tempo changes between like Are We the Waiting, St. Jimmy, back to going slow with Novocaine, back to fast with She's a Rebel. back to slow again with Extraordinary Girl, and then really picking up the pace with Letter Bomb, and just destroying you from there on out on the rest of the album. After it makes you cry with Wake Me Up With Some Temperance. I mean, just the singles on here, they are the absolute best singles. The closing melody, low-end melody riff of Boulevard of Broken Dreams, you can't fuck with it. Holiday, catchy guitar solo, American Idiot, overall incredible song. So, my favorite Green Day album, hands down, with Dookie being a kind of a close second. So let's recap from 13 to 1. Least favorite to most favorite, we got Father of All, Trey, Dose, Kerplunk, Uno, 1039 Smooth, Insomniac, Warning, then Insomniac, 21st Century Breakdown, Revolution Radio, Nimrod, Dookie, and of course your number one spot goes to American Idiot. Top 10 tracks, which are kind of subject to change, but for the most part, they are Good Riddance, Time of Your Life. Come on, it's an excellent song. Revolution Radio, Christian's Inferno. All these years, man. I wish I knew about that song. I love it. What's Her Name? Basket Case, 21 Guns, When I Come Around, and then the top 3 songs are all from the same album. You got American Idiot, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and Letter Bomb. So how many did I put on there from American Idiot? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, I broke my rule. I put 4 on there, but how could I not? But yeah, so thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Comment your opinions. What would you rank higher? What would you rank lower? Why am I wrong for putting American Idiot number 1, or why am I wrong for putting Kerplunk so low, or for ordering the trilogy incorrectly, or do you think Father of All is the greatest album of all time? Let me know why. Do you have any Green Day stories? Are you a 30-year-old like me that got into Green Day when he became a teenager and picked up guitar? I think John and I from ARTV actually have that in common. I think we're the same age and we got into Green Day at the same time, around the same era. So, John, if you're watching this video, man, hit me up. I'd love to talk to you about music. Again, comment. I respond to pretty much all of them, and be sure to check out the rest of the Ranked and Reviewed playlist, where I do mostly metal music, but I do alternative punk, rap, and other genres as well, but it's mostly metal. So, alright guys, I'm Jay Dennis, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. And here's the one who was interrupting. And him as well.